My name is Natalie, and at 31, I've reached a place in my career where many are still trying to figure out their next steps. I'm a senior manager at a tech company in Seattle. Every day, my job demands absolute focus and an iron will, traits I've cultivated for over 10 years since graduating from college. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. My childhood wasn't marked by luxury or comfort. Instead, I grew up believing one thing: if I wanted respect in a world that valued success above all, I would have to work twice as hard as everyone else. There were sleepless nights, curled up in a tiny rental room, poring over textbooks I could barely afford. I often had to make a choice between food and textbooks, but every sacrifice paid off. I won a full scholarship to a prestigious university, and now, at a stage in my life where many are still finding their footing, I've secured a position that commands respect. At work, I'm the go-to person for high-stakes projects. My boss trusts me with some of the most challenging tasks, and my colleagues appreciate my decisiveness. My team calls me Steel Natalie because I remain unshaken, no matter the pressure. I'm not cold, though, far from it. I'm simply clear, fair, and never let emotions interfere with decisions. But beneath that tough exterior, there's a woman who craves love, care, and the comforting feeling of someone holding her hand at the end of a long day. I want what many others take for granted: companionship, a love that feels effortless. Over the years, I had a few relationships, but none of them ever seemed to stick. Some ended because I was always too busy, always working late into the night. Others couldn't handle dating a woman who was more successful, had a higher income, and was often more driven than they were. One man even told me, "You make me feel like less of a man." I laughed it off at first, but later, that night, I sat in front of the mirror, questioning myself. Was I really doing something wrong? Was I too much for them? The answer wasn't clear, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. Then, one cold spring evening, with the Seattle rain falling softly outside, my close friend Ashley invited me to her husband's birthday party. I didn't want to go. I had been drained by back-to-back meetings all week. The thought of squeezing into a crowd of strangers wasn't appealing, but Ashley begged me. "Please, just come for an hour. You're my bridesmaid. Don't say no." Reluctantly, I agreed. That night, little did I know, everything was about to change. I met Ethan that evening. He wasn't the kind of man who immediately captured attention. He didn't stand out in a crowd. He didn't try to impress with grand gestures or flashy talk. In fact, he was quiet and reserved. But when he smiled, there was something about it, genuine, warm, and it put me strangely at ease. "You're Natalie, right?" he asked as I stood off to the side, nursing a glass of wine and lost in my thoughts. I nodded, surprised. "How did you know?" "Ashley told me that if I ever saw a beautiful woman standing alone, looking like she regrets showing up, that would be you." His words made me burst out laughing, something I hadn't done in weeks. We talked for hours that night. There was no pretense, no pressure. Just two people sharing stories, perspectives, and a few random thoughts. He worked in HR consulting, had been through some failed relationships, and was about my age. The conversation was easy, comfortable, and after a while, we exchanged numbers. I didn't overthink it. For the first time in a long while, I just felt light. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and I kept in touch. His texts came first thing in the morning, often checking in after my long meetings. Sometimes he sent me cute dog videos, knowing I had a golden retriever when I was younger. Each message made me smile, and soon, I found myself looking forward to hearing from him. After 2 months, Ethan told me he wanted something serious. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a grand proclamation. It was simple and sincere. "I don't care if you're more successful, make more money, or come home late from work. I just need to know if you're happy with me." That was the moment I knew this was different. No games, no pretense, just honesty and a real connection. I said yes. And a year later, we were married. Our wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect in its own way. We held it in a small garden north of Seattle, where we had our first date under a drizzling March rain. It wasn't the stuff of dreams, but to me, it was enough. The man standing beside me had held my hand through the toughest days of my life, And now, we were starting this new chapter together. Ethan's parents, Carl and Diane, surprised me with their kindness. Diane gave me a hand-knit shawl, telling me, just a little gift for a daughter-in-law who works in an office. It's easy to get chilly. Carl, with his teasing smile, would joke with Ethan, saying, "The boy is lucky to marry such a smart and strong woman." It felt like home. It felt like the beginning of something beautiful. $100,000 on the renovations, and now I was expected to handle an additional $140,000 of debt that wasn't even mine. I felt the weight of it in my chest, a pressure I hadn't felt in a long time. I had worked so hard to build my career, my independence, and now it seemed like everything was slipping through my fingers. Ethan's voice brought me back to the moment. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I thought you should know before we move forward with anything more." I stared at him, feeling a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Why wasn't I made aware of the full picture before agreeing to this? Ethan's shoulders slumped, and he avoided my gaze. "I didn't want to burden you. You're always so busy with work, and I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to make things harder for us." I let out a long, slow breath. "Ethan, this isn't about me being busy. It's about honesty. We're married. We're a team. This is something we should have talked about long before now. This is my money, my future at risk. And I don't even know how we're going to handle this. You should have come to me sooner." He reached for my hand, but I pulled it away, the anger building up. "I don't even know if I can keep doing this, Ethan. This isn't just about the money, it's about trust. And right now, I don't feel like I can trust you." Ethan's face crumbled with regret, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Natalie. I really am. I didn't mean for it to get this far. Please, don't let this be the end of us. I'm still figuring this out. I just need your help." I stood up, pacing in the small living room. "I don't even know where to start with this. I don't want to lose everything I've worked for, Ethan. And I certainly don't want to carry this burden alone." The room was thick with silence as I tried to process everything. My heart felt heavy, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of the decisions that lay before me. This was a turning point, and I wasn't sure where it would take me. I loved Ethan, but was love enough to shoulder this kind of responsibility? I needed time to think, but I wasn't sure if I had the luxury of time. Pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I could feel my heart beat faster, a subtle unease building in my chest. I wasn't sure what was going on, but something inside me told me I needed to be cautious. I stepped out of the car, the rain drizzling down around me as I made my way to the front door. The sound of muffled voices reached me as I approached. It was Carl and Ethan, and they were speaking in lowered tones, too quiet for me to make out any words, but the tension was palpable. I pushed open the door without knocking, and the moment I did, the conversation halted. Carl quickly stood, clearing his throat, while Ethan seemed to fumble with his words. "Hey, Nat," Ethan said, trying to sound casual, though there was a strain in his voice. I nodded, not saying anything right away. I just stood there, waiting for one of them to explain what I had walked into. Carl gave me a forced smile, his eyes darting between me and Ethan. "I was just leaving," he said, excusing himself hastily, making his way toward the door. As he passed, his eyes lingered on me for a second longer than necessary. I turned to Ethan, my patience wearing thin. "What was that about?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Ethan hesitated, then let out a sigh. "It's nothing, Nat. Just a conversation about the house." I raised an eyebrow, not convinced. It didn't sound like nothing. "What's really going on?" He seemed to falter for a moment, looking around as if searching for the right words. "It's just, my dad has been trying to figure out how to handle the rest of the renovation costs, and Carl was just giving me advice." I stared at him for a long moment, not buying his explanation. It was more than clear by now that there was something off, something he wasn't telling me. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to align, and I felt a creeping realization wash over me. "Ethan, I've been paying everything. I've been covering debts, renovations, all of it. And for what? To be treated like I'm the family, eh?" I took a breath, trying to keep my calm, but inside I was seething. You said you would pay me back. And yet, I'm still covering everything while you get to live like nothing's wrong. Ethan's face shifted, and I saw the guilt flash across his eyes before he quickly masked it. I didn't want it to get this bad, Nat. It's not like I don't appreciate what you've done. It's just been hard, and I thought I could handle it. I shook my head slowly, disbelief settling in. You thought you could handle it? By letting me do everything? By never once stepping up? My voice was quieter now, more controlled, but no less firm. This isn't about handling things anymore, Ethan. This is about responsibility. And right now, you're not taking any. There was a long silence between us. Ethan opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't let him. I need space, I said, my voice steady but firm. I don't know how much more I can keep doing this. I walked past him, heading to the stairs without waiting for a response. The air was thick with unspoken words, with all the emotions I had been holding back for so long. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living this way. Upstairs, I locked the bedroom door behind me. I stood there for a moment, taking in the stillness of the room, the silence that felt so loud now. The weight of everything hit me hard in that moment, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply sat down on the edge of the bed, breathing deeply, trying to regain control. This was no longer just about money. It was about my dignity, my future, and my right to stand up for myself. Whatever happened next, I was done playing the role of the silent, self-sacrificing wife. The next chapter of my life was about to begin, and I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate the terms. Made sure everything was airtight. The plan was falling into place perfectly. Every step of the way, I stayed calm and focused, even as I knew I was walking into a storm. I didn't want to just leave. I wanted justice. I wanted them to see the cost of their greed, the cost of manipulating me like a pawn in their game. When the divorce papers were finally ready, I arranged for a quiet, private meeting with Ethan. I told him it was time for us to talk. He thought it was another routine conversation about the house or finances. But when I handed him the papers, the weight of what was happening slowly dawned on him. What's this? His voice cracked, disbelief sinking in. I'm done, Ethan. You and your family have taken enough. Now it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. You don't get to control me anymore. He stared at me, stunned, his mouth opening and closing, searching for the words he would never find. All the fake smiles, all the words of gratitude he had thrown at me in the past months, they were gone. I thought you'd never figure it out. He finally mumbled, but I didn't let him finish. There was nothing left to say. I looked him in the eyes one last time, and for the first time in a long time, I felt no anger, just a calm satisfaction.
No, Ethan.
You thought I'd never wake up, but I have. You didn't just manipulate me. You underestimated me. I was never just a gold mine, and you'll learn that the hard way. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving him there with nothing but the weight of his own actions. He wasn't just losing me as his wife. He was losing everything. A month later, the house was sold. The debts were cleared, and the money I had spent for years finally came back to me in full. The emotional debt? Well, that had been paid long before. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that relationship. I was stronger, wiser, and free. I knew what I was worth now. And no one was ever going to take that from me again. Married, Ethan. You may have forgotten that part, but I haven't. This is still my property, my house, and now my terms. You have no legal right to be here, and neither do your parents. Now, pack up and leave. I won't say it again. Ethan stammered, looking from me to the woman behind him, who was now silently standing by, her smile faltering. The control I had once given him was now mine to take back, and with every word, I could see the reality of his actions crashing down on him. You're just going to throw me out? His voice was a mix of anger and disbelief.
No, Ethan.
I'm simply doing what you forced me to do. You overstepped. You thought you could take advantage of me forever. Well, now you get to see what happens when someone stops being afraid. I turned to walk away, leaving him with the final words hanging in the air, heavy with the weight of everything I had endured. I didn't care about his protests, his guilt trips, or his desperate attempts to reclaim control. It was over. By the time I got back to my apartment, Claudia had already sent over the paperwork for trespassing and unlawful occupancy. Within the hour, a letter was delivered to Ethan, his parents, and the woman who thought she could just waltz into my life and take what wasn't hers. Ethan called a few hours later, his voice shaking. "Natalie, we can work this out. You can't just throw me out like this. This is my family, my house." It was our house, Ethan. I cut him off. Until you threw me away. You and your family thought you could turn everything I worked for into your personal playground. Well, I'm done playing along. You don't get to control me anymore. There was a long silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought he might actually understand. But he didn't. He never would. "I'll be there in 3 hours," I said calmly, hanging up. The countdown had already started. 3 hours later, Ethan and his family, along with his new girlfriend, arrived at the house to find every last trace of their belongings packed and ready to be removed. The movers I'd hired showed up right on time. Every corner of the house was emptied, every item logged and accounted for. They were officially trespassers now, and the weight of that reality hit harder than anything else I had done so far. Ethan tried one final time to negotiate, to reason with me, but it was useless. I stood by, my arms crossed, watching the inevitable unfold. With every box they packed, I could see the defeat in Ethan's eyes. His pride was broken, his control shattered. When the last box was lifted from a house, I stood in the doorway, watching them leave. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't need to gloat. It was enough just to see the door close behind them, knowing that I had taken back everything they had tried to steal. I had learned something that day, that justice is not about revenge or retaliation. It's about standing firm, knowing your worth, and not letting anyone dictate your life. In the end, it was my peace, my happiness, and my future that mattered. And no one would ever take that from me again. $15,000 for her part in the affair and breach of marital ethics. It was a small victory, but it was mine. More importantly, it was a reminder that the price for betrayal is not always paid immediately, but it always comes. As the dust settled, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. In my quest for justice, I had discovered a side of myself I hadn't known existed, a side that was capable of cold, calculated strength, but also of knowing when to let go. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my power. And with each victory, whether it was legal or emotional, I was reminded that true strength lies in being able to stand firm in your own truth, no matter how others try to manipulate or diminish you. The money, the settlement, the house, none of it mattered as much as the liberation I felt. I was no longer defined by my past with Ethan or his family. I was free, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. Months later, I found myself in a place I never imagined, at peace. I had rebuilt my life on my own terms, and I had done it with resilience and grace. I continued to work hard at my career, nurtured my relationships with those who truly supported me, and most importantly, I learned to trust myself again. As for Ethan and his family, they remained in the past where they belonged. I no longer cared about their opinions or their attempts to rewrite history. I had rewritten my own story, and it was a story of strength, independence, and self-respect. And in the end, that's what mattered most. I think Natalie's journey is incredibly powerful and inspiring. She not only stood up for her worth, but also turned a devastating experience into a catalyst for personal growth and empowerment. By taking control of her financial future, learning to trust herself, and letting go of the toxic parts of her past, she demonstrates that self-love and strength can be born from adversity. Her story shows that standing up for yourself isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your power and building the life you deserve. The fact that she didn't let heartbreak define her is so important. She found a way to rise above, learn from the pain, and ultimately use it to create a future where she's in control. In terms of whether she made the right choice by standing up for her worth, absolutely. By doing so, she found her independence, and that's something invaluable. Not only did she gain financial compensation, but she also regained her self-respect, confidence, and clarity. Sometimes, standing up for yourself isn't easy, but it's essential to growing into the person you're meant to be. Her journey serves as a reminder that we can all reclaim our worth after betrayal, and that letting go of things or people who no longer serve us is often the key to unlocking a new, more fulfilling chapter in life. Please feel free to comment below if you like this. Remember to like and subscribers for more.